Welcome to the Josh Bolton Show, where we dive into interesting and inspiring conversations. And now, your host, Josh Bolton.
How long have you been a podcast coach?
I have been a podcast coach for probably like 3 years. We got to a certain point where I think we were like 300 episodes in or something, maybe 400 episodes in. And somebody came to me and said, "Hey, can you help me with my podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can help you with everything. I mean, I've done it at this point." And then somebody said to me, "Why you should really start coaching podcasters." And I was like, interesting. I never really thought of that. And that's been one of the bigger part of our businesses, honestly, which is surprising because that's not why I started. You know what I mean?
Right. Same here. That's where I was curious how long you've been doing it, because a lot of people have lately, a lot of guests even have been like, can you coach me? And I'm like, sure. Yeah. Like, I'll give you one free. You came on my show, I'll give you a free thing. But yeah, it's so weird. And we're sitting here going like, I've done this like a year and a half, 2 years, but I'm like, I wouldn't consider myself, I guess, a professional.
Yeah. The interesting thing is you don't really, it depends, right? This is a fine line, especially if you have imposter syndrome, which I've definitely dealt with. You don't have to be at the top of the mountain. You usually only have to be 3 or 4 steps ahead of the person you're trying to help. And I think that's an interesting thing to have the feelings for, because if you're 100 episodes in and somebody wants to start, I mean, you have 100 times the experience they do. So I think that's an interesting thing, right. An interesting perspective, at least.
It is. Yeah, and that was the one client. I didn't know how to deal with online sales tax and tax nexuses. So I was like, hey, I'll set you up a special tier on Patreon. You pay me there, kind of thing. And he was like, is Patreon a write-off? I'm like, well, I mean, if they really want to get technical, it says coaching. So
yeah. But that in the beginning, that's kind of like, that's par for the course. We were doing Venmo. It was like Venmo me, PayPal me, whatever, Cash App me. Now it all runs through
your CRM.
Everything runs through the business now. Everything's like, it all goes to one place. We don't accept payments anywhere else. I don't want cash. We don't do checks. But in the beginning, you're just kind of figuring it out. I think that's par for the course.
Very true. So, I guess, what is the CRM you're using for your coaching?
So we don't really run a CRM. We use Stripe as our financial collection.
Okay.
And then everything else for us is very one-to-one. Like, yeah, we have an email list, but we don't sell on our email list. That's never the goal. Like, it's just add value. For us, Josh, it's one-on-one conversations with the community. That's like the interesting thing about us is we have like spreadsheets of people who we've worked with and we have names and emails and stuff like that, but it's more relationship based than anything. It's like, do I think Josh would be a good fit for this? Nah, not necessarily. Okay. I'll reach out to him if we have something that I think he'd be a good fit for. That's really how we've done it, because I think at the end of the day, you have to understand you can only ask so many times without breaking rapport. And the level of your ask has to be directly connected to the level of the relationship. Imagine if I just meet you now and I say, "Hey, Josh, can you come out to New Hampshire next week and help me move?" It's like, no, there's no way you're going to do that, even if you're the nicest person in the world. But if you and I are really good friends and you're local and I say, "Hey, can you mind like just giving me a couple hours of your time on Saturday? I need to move some stuff." If the level of the relationship is there, you're more likely to actually be able to work with that person. So yeah, for us, it's very specific. We don't just like throw messages out there and hope. I think that's a different approach that we have.
That's good. I've actually talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers about that. And that's what they said. They're like, now get very intentional about what you say. And people come and I'm like, oh, okay. Lately I've noticed that. I'm like, oh, I'm more specific what I talk about.
Yeah. You have to be. You have to niche.
Yes. Especially in this new algo world. You got to stay in your lane until you got a big enough audience, then go have fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even today, so I woke up today and we track our finances and we had like 3,600 listens or something, whatever it was. And that's more than we got in the first year. So like we got 1,014, I think, in the first year. So we had 3 times our listens today that we had in the first year. Mm-hmm. And it's that interesting thing of one of the best things we ever did was niche more. Even though it seems like there's a smaller sample size, in the grand scheme of things, I would rather have 1,000 people who are talking to directly than 10,000 people who are kind of listening.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, what were some of your tactics that you did? I'm just going to keep all that in, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
What were some of your tactics that you did that helped grow your show so much?
One of them, it's interesting because to your point, early on, Instagram and social media were different. So we started the show in 2017. So we've been around for like 5.5 years. So in the beginning, somebody would they would share a still of our show. And it would say like, this is the podcast I'm listening to. I love these guys. I would send them a message and start a conversation with them. And eventually I would get on the phone with them for free, just like to get to know them. So one of my friends calls it scale the unscalable. That's really what we've done really well is we focused on like, what are the most important touch points and how do we try to scale them through effort, even though they're not scalable. So number one is we had real authentic conversations with our listeners in the attempt to add value, not to sell anything. So that's one part. Two, we built a business based on, we want to help you get from where you are to where you want to go, even if you don't have money yet, which a lot of businesses aren't doing. It's you must exchange me X amount of dollars for X service. For us, half of our business is free, whether it's the podcast 7 times a week. We do a free podcast every week. We do a free virtual event every week. Yeah. So that's the thing is like, we're playing a little bit of a different game long-term, which is that's important. And then this is the other thing. I've probably been on 200 or 300 other shows, which is definitely good for our podcast as well, but it also helps me master, right? Become a better speaker, have good stories that land. So those are a few. High-level guests helps. Like we've had some pretty high-level guests in our industry, which helps, but it's consistency. We don't miss. That's the thing is when my business partner and I partnered up, I think we partnered up at like episode number 15. We've never missed an episode in over 1,000, right? We're going to drop our 1100th episode tomorrow. So consistency over everything for us and getting better every time.
So I'm just curious for you, do you have 7 interviews a day or is it like, 7 interviews a week, or is it like 2 or 3 and then you two throw in your nuggets in between?
So we only do solos now. So it's just me and it's just my business partner and I. And what we'll do, like if we do have a guest, because we have some guests coming up that they're like friends of ours that are higher level and we're like, well, this is aligned. We know it's aligned. We'll have them back on. We'll just drop that as a bonus episode. So there'll always be 7 solos at least. And then maybe we'll drop a guest as a bonus episode. But in the beginning, you can't really do that because having guests is going to build your audience. But we're at a place now where I just want to nurture our audience and add more specific value to them. I think that's the play for us now.
So do you have them like reach out to you, like DM you in Instagram or Twitter, like questions to cover or like go hardcore? There's a podcaster I followed called Vinny Torlich. He's a big keto guy. And he literally gets on Twitter and replies to as many tweets as he can for like an hour span.
Yeah,
and I'm sitting now,
scale the unscalable.
I just sit there and I'm like, that must be stressful for like the solid 60 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things like, we have people that reach out, but one of the things that we have been very, very intentional with is probably the best word is I will not go outside of what I think is valuable for our audience. So I'm always going from the frame of what is our audience going through, what will resonate with them, and what do they need to hear? And that's like, we just live there. So that's one of the reasons we don't have certain guests on is because, they might be big and they might be somebody who would draw eyes to us, but it's not in alignment for us to share the message with our audience.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. You're the guest today. We're chatting about this because I've been really thinking of retooling my show because what I predominantly started off with guest interviews and it was great and I got a lot of traction, but now I've hit that plateau. I'm not dying, but I'm not growing. And it's like, okay, I need to change something now. So it's just interesting. Because I've been humoring the idea of like me coming on doing like a solo, like I'll talk about this kind of thing. I'm very good at business and executive thinking. Or I've had a very interesting up and coming story. So it might be like, okay, nuggets of this that I've learned.
What's the number one problem that your listeners are going through?
See, because I didn't niche down. I'm just kind of like, as long as you have a cool story, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
My biggest one I keep, like my top performer still to this day, and it's like a year and a half old, is understanding women, essentially.
So do you have a predominantly male audience, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. I would really sit down. I think it's probably time to niche. If you're not growing, it's because I call it the Joe Rogan approach, where it's like, I want to talk to everybody about anything all the time. And that's great in the beginning, but eventually it gets to the point where then you're relying on your pure interview skills, your personality, and the caliber of guests you can get on, where if you niched, it would be way easier for you to do a solo episode once a week where it's 5 ways to grow your business, 5 ways to scale your business, 5 ways to be a better leader. Whatever your ideal listener is going through, that you got to be the person they come to. So my thought is always this. What is our show about? What problem do we solve? How do we solve it? And who do we solve it for? Because your podcast is just a product, really, right. At the end of the day. It's just a product with personality, really. And then, so what is the brand? Like, what is the Josh Bolton brand? If I was to walk into the Josh Bolton restaurant, what would it be? And then treat your podcast like that. Like, when you come here, this is what you get. This is what's on the menu every time. And it's always good.
Okay. So you've said it more elegantly than I was just thinking that, because I'm like, okay, yes, mine is the go-to for business, like generally the business guy, but like one of my many guests I had on was a professional wrestler from the 80s, and he was telling his stories. That was crazy what he went through.
Which wrestler was it?
Jeff Bearden.
Jeff Bearden. I don't know Jeff Bearden.
I'll look him up. I think he went by the Iron Giant and then the Colossus.
I'll have to look him up. Let me write it down.
He was telling me all his crazy stories where like he got stabbed like 6 times and they tried to kill him with a lead-filled tire. And then like, he's like, and I was in India and just train bomb went off, perfectly normal, males flying everywhere, but everyone didn't care. And I'm like,
my goodness.
And then the next day I talked to a publicly traded CEO. Like, I did this where I was telling him the same thing. And he's like, dude, like, do you, what's your goal with the show?
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's the interesting thing is people just have to know what to expect. That's all.
So then I will definitely niche down and retool some stuff. So then are you specifically now just a podcast about podcasting essentially?
No. So that's the interesting thing is like for us, our podcast has become a business where the podcast is completely separate from, like, we have a web service business, we have a social media business, we have a podcast production business, and they're not necessarily currently our podcast listeners that are working with us. So it's interesting. For us, our podcast is heart-driven, but no BS, holistic self-improvement for dream chasers. That's all we talk about is holistic self-improvement, leveling up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. I just started another podcast because I needed to do an 8th episode a week on podcasting. So I just started another podcast all about podcasting. That way I can get that message out there as well. So it's very interesting. Like, our business is very large and it's very multifaceted. And that's why it's such a challenge, because there's so many things going on at all times. Like, I just got off a meeting before this from the business.
Right. So I'm just curious, how did you get into web services and social media?
So in the beginning, so this is what happened.
Okay.
We started the podcast and it was like, all right, cool, we have a podcast. And then it was, okay, how do we make money? Okay, let's coach people. Let's coach our listeners and add more value to their life, thus building our business. Then it got to the point where we said, okay, well, we need a website. Like, we're obviously going to need a website so people can find us. So I spent 2 weeks in Wix building a website for like 12 hours a day. So okay. I spent like a large amount of my time building a website, and it was garbage. It wasn't good. So then we found somebody to build us a website. Then people would ask us how we built our website. So it was like, oh, okay, we can just have a team that builds websites. Then, since we started working with some fairly high-level clients, people started asking us like, hey, do you guys do social media stuff? Like, I don't want to do my social media, and I'm going to pay somebody to do it. And since you guys are producing the show, I'd rather pay you to do it. And it was like, oh, so there's definitely a need for this in the market. So what happened was we just tried to solve all the problems that we had coming up because we realized that most people are going to have the same problems. That's really what it was.
Interesting. So I take it now you outsource a lot of stuff, or do you mad lad and do everything yourself?
We have a 17-person team.
Good. I was going to say that would be a lot to do.
Yeah, no, I can't. And this is the truth. I'm not good at building websites. I'm not good at those other things. There are certain things like my Genius Zone. I try to stay there. My business partner, Alan, he tries to stay there. And through building the business, our goal is to make sure that everybody is in the right position when it comes to their strengths. So no, we have a large team that we are very, very grateful for, and they help us a ton.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So then the marketing aspect of the podcast, was it just mainly word of mouth you recommended, or was it like because of the tagging and interactions, they became like a zombie loyalist kind of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're almost, and again, I know this is a dangerous statement and dangerous thought process. We're like anti-marketing in terms of
interesting.
One of and this might be just a misbelief, but I've seen this so often. I believe for many people, marketing is making something look better than it really is. And here's my analogy, right? I've never had a Big Mac that looks like the Big Mac on the commercials. And again, I love Big Macs, Josh, so I got nothing against it. But usually it looks like it's been ran over by a car and then backed up over again. Still tastes great. For us, we have worked so hard on our real lives where I just want our brand to be a reflection of my life. And I think a lot of people are more focused on making the product look good than be good. For us, it's been the opposite, which is why it's taken us longer. Yeah, we're successful and we have 650,000 listens or whatever it is at this point, but it would be way more if we went the other route. We're just like optimized for the future. So for us, the marketing is word of mouth. The marketing is when you add value to somebody, they will talk about you. So if you think about it, between group coaching and all the clients we probably have close to like 80 clients. If each one of those clients tells 2 people, and each one of those 2 people tells 1 person, then you can start to see how the numbers really, really add up. So we're value and impact based when it comes to marketing, and then basing that off word of mouth. And we obviously, we put our stuff on social media, but other than that, we don't pay at all for marketing.
So yeah, I'm assuming you also do like YouTube and all that.
Yeah. Yep. We do. Every episode goes on YouTube as well.
I'm just curious, do you guys use Zoom or like Riverside to record everything?
StreamYard. StreamYard. So we do something, I'll give you a little hack.
Okay.
It depends on the level of production, but we will record our video in StreamYard, and we will natively record our audio to our laptop in Audacity, GarageBand, Audition, whatever, sync them in post-production. That way you have the best video you can possibly have, as well as the best audio you can possibly have. And then that'll increase the production value a little bit.
That's actually a really good hack. Yeah, I paid for Audition, the Adobe Audition.
Yeah.
So I would just use that, but that's a good point. So I want to say for the video, it's not good. The audio, if you record to the computer, it's okay. With enough background, I can make it sound back to normal. But I've been trying to think of that. I'm like, what should I do?
That's what I would do. I would go to StreamYard, because StreamYard, you can do 4K. You can do 1080 or 4K. Maybe not 4K, 1080. But it actually is 1080. When you export it, it doesn't make it garbage. Like Zoom is great. Zoom's a great platform, and it's awesome and it's cheap, but the video is just not the same.
Oh God, no.
It's just not right. It's just not the same. So yeah, I would say that. I would say StreamYard, Riverside's fine, Squadcast, any of those really will do it. But the audio, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, the majority of my listens are going to be audio, so let me get video too. What's the easiest way to do it? Just record it all in Zoom. The problem is you're not getting high quality audio. So the place where you have the most ears is the lower quality, which in the long run probably will be somewhat negative.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I've definitely noticed that. Like I said, it's a plateau. It's not dying. It's not graining. And That's where I'm like asking how to get interactions, because I'm like, I've done this for how long and no one's like tagged me on social media.
Yeah.
And that's where
changed. It's changed. Like we don't get that many tags anymore either. It
okay,
really
so it's
is,
not just me then.
No, I don't think so. I think people are using social media in a different way where I don't necessarily know. I mean, even if you think about what's working on social media, it's not necessarily value driven. It's more entertainment than education. Like the reels and TikToks, a lot of them are just like 15 seconds of, I don't want to say garbage, but it's just entertainment.
Mind numbing.
Exactly. So I don't think people are sharing value as much as they used to. And that's just my take. I think the other part of it is we vastly underestimate the value of one human. If you could, so I think of it like there's 3 buckets. And
okay.
this will be good for you. There's 3 buckets of listeners. We have cold eyes. These are people who don't know us, like us, or trust us. So I'm on your show today. Everybody who hears this is cold eyes. They have no idea who I am. We have warm eyes / warming eyes. These are people who are in your system and they're following what you do, and you're moving them through the business with value. So you're warming them up. You're nurturing them as you go. And then we have what I think might be the biggest bucket that people lose sight of, lost eyes. These are people who know you, they like you, they trust you, Josh, but they forgot about you. They moved on. They are listening to something else. So at all times, every day, I'm focused on how do I get cold eyes to warm? How do I warm somebody up more by adding more value to them? And how do I find somebody who used to listen to the show that doesn't anymore? And why is that? And if you can have one habit under each of those buckets every day, I think that's a hack where everybody's worried about more. Like, let me get more listeners. My question is always, what are you doing with the listeners you have? Because if you actually nurture the listeners you have, you'll get more listens, which is a weird thing. It's the same amount of people, but more listens because people are more invested.
True. Yeah. I would say that would be what the Vinny guy did. But that was also what I was listening back about when you started, like 17, 18. It was also when like Twitter was at its most brutal too. Mm. But well, okay, there's the whole thing going on today, but yeah, I think that's what he was doing it, but he's very entrepreneurial driven, just like trying to think back. So that would make sense. He's like, oh, everyone's a lead, but like one's cold, one's warm, and one's really hot. Mm. Just got to make sure we keep pushing everyone down the way. It's interesting. Thank you for that hack. That was really good.
Yeah, of course. It's value. Like that's the thing is, I mean, our business model has like 25 layers. It's wild. Like there's so much going on, but the half of it's free. Like I will not ask you for $1 until you've like been with us listening and you've joined our private Facebook group, because I don't think it's necessarily right for you yet. That's an interesting, right? That's an interesting thing where it's my job to make sure that I'm adding as much value as I can to you, and I'm putting you in the business where I think you should go. If somebody comes into a car dealership and says, my budget is $16,000, you're not going to show them a $95,000 truck. A lot of people are trying to do that, where they're saying like, okay, cool, you're somebody who listens to my podcast, you should work with me. It doesn't work that way. Now you can play the numbers game, but it's different. You have to really think about what's best for the client first. What's best for the listener first.
Absolutely. So then, yeah, it's more the give value and all that. I don't know why I was reminiscing. I was lifting weights back in like 18, 19 before the pandemic hit. Mm. And I went to this one nutrition shop. I was buying like protein and all that. And the guy never sold. They had this cool weight machine where like it can measure your body fat and muscle ratio and every like super detailed. Mm. No charge. You just come in, scan, and he'd read the chart and be like, "Oh, you're having trouble with this. I'd recommend that, but you don't have to get it," kind of thing. Mm. Total hands off. And then it was just one of those. After like 3 or 4 times, I actually like sat there and I said out loud, "I'm like, I feel like a real asshole just using your expensive machine." And I'm not buying anything. So I handed him the machine and said, my budget's like $75. Like, what can I get that you would recommend? And he's like, oh, you could have kept being an asshole. I don't care. I was like, morally, I feel like I need to at least buy something. And that's where then, he just showed me all these different stuff. He gave me a deal, and I was absolute diehard until like pandemic hit. And I'm like, well, I'm not working out now.
It's a long-term relationship. That's what he did. And maybe that's just the way that person is or that business is. But like, that's really, I think that's where we're going now is, so, all right, we're talking about nutrition. We're talking about fitness supplements. And I'm sure you can remember this. I don't know how into the supplement industry you are, but there are supplements that crush. Like there are supplement companies. There was a company called Shreds. I don't know if you remember Shreds.
Yes.
What happened? Shreds got super big. Everybody realized that, I don't know. I think this is kind of sketchy. I don't know if any of this is legit. I think this might be a fraud. They crashed and burned, and I think they rebranded to something else and started again. A lot of supplement companies do that. They crush it. They lose all the trust of the people that they built trust with, and then they have to rebuild another company because they're not thinking long-term. They're thinking short-term. Now, if you think of the best long-term supplement companies, what do they have? They have trust. They're proven. Right? They're vetted. They have really good reviews. They're professional. It's long-term versus short-term.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with everything that I've done, the supplement stuff, the guy wouldn't recommend unless it was like at least 8 years old. He's like, if you're 8 years in the supplement industry, like you're set, you're good. As long as you don't have some nasty secret in the back, you're good to go. Yeah. And that's what he would give me. And that's cool. I've like never put the 2 and 2 together till now.
There's a lot of examples of that. Gary V, like some people don't like Gary very much, but he's doing it in the right way by just adding value and just being there. A lot of what he does is just, he's playing the long game. That's the interesting thing. It's like it will look like he is winning, but in a lot of ways, it probably looks like he's losing compared to what he could do. But in the future, it'll be wild for him.
You know what's crazy? I haven't really seen him on TikTok or YouTube lately.
Yeah, I think he's probably building like multiple other things that'll outlive him. It's interesting.
Yeah, for him, like he has no time to like rest. Like, yeah, I think he's even mentioned like the only time he really gets to sleep is when he's on the plane flight somewhere.
Yeah, that's wild.
Oh,
right. That's the one thing about virtual that's wonderful is you can. That's something that is going to change the landscape of podcasting, speaking, coaching, training a lot. Is you and I are literally across the country. And we're having a conversation right now. I did a summit the other day that was in front of however many people. It's all virtual. I was literally here. I had my pajama pants on like I do right now. And, I just jump on. There's no travel. It doesn't cost me anything. It's truly wonderful the amount that you can do virtually. Like I have a co-host and we record virtually every time. So we got rid of our studio. We don't need any more. It's interesting how that has really shifted over the last few years, definitely with the pandemic.
Yeah, and especially with different services coming up that you can record better. Yep. I would say it looks like you have an actual board, like a soundboard.
I do, yeah. So this is an old one. I have a mixer with a bunch of mics and all that happy jazz. So we had a full like studio set up with multiple cameras and lights and curtains and multiple TVs and all sorts of different stuff. And then it was like, all right, we're paying $600 a month for this. It's probably not worth it when I can just take the equipment at home. I have my own studio. There's no point in having to travel anymore.
It's true. Yeah. And we'll say whatever's left over, you can reinvest back in the podcast too.
Yep. Yeah. $500 a month can go a long way for whatever, services or extra emails or extra storage, whatever it may be.
I'm just curious, just a side note, where did you find the prism background that you have?
I think it's called, it's 3D wall art. I found it on Amazon. When I set up the studio, I was like, all right, we want to optimize for audio, which we're doing, but I want my backdrop to look cool and it has to have some sort of depth. That's big on YouTube is like lights and depth. That usually does really well. So I just looked on Amazon. I think it was like, I don't know. I think I got the whole pack to cover my entire wall for like maybe $120.
That's not bad at all.
No, they're just PVC. Like, I don't know if you can hear it. Plastic PVC.
Kind of.
So it's not sound deadening. It's actually really bad. If you were to like have it in front of you, it would echo sound. But since it's behind me, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I wasn't saying if it was in front, you would like need a whole curtain and everything, like this guy here.
Yeah, we'd be in trouble. A lot of people say that. They're like, "Oh, I love your sound deadening." It's like, no. Don't get this if you want to be quiet, because this is not good for sound deadening.
Yeah, you would need those like $30 foam things.
Yeah. We had those in the studio, and then when we moved, we just tossed them all but we didn't have the $30 ones. We got like the pack of 120 for $100 or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we weren't balling. We no way. It was like, I cannot afford to get 100 of these at however much it is.
Yeah. Some of them I've seen now, they have like a whole. It almost looks like a tile. What is it? Joe Rogan on his new like spaceship looking one has those.
Yeah,
but it was what's his name? Pat Flynn.
Yep.
I don't know why, but I randomly watched a video of his and he was unboxing those. And that's where he like straight up said, he's like, and he just looks at the camera awkwardly. My normal viewers don't buy this. Like, please don't do it. And that's where I'm like, why? He's like, it's $800 a panel. I'm like,
oh my goodness.
I was like, wow, I can see why he was like emphasizing, don't buy this.
That's wild. I love Pat Flynn. Huge fan of Pat Flynn. He's so knowledgeable on podcasting and just everything, marketing, building an audience. He is one of the best.
He is. He's super humble too. Yeah. He's getting like that super aggressive looking beard too now.
I'm jealous because I can't grow a beard like that.
Yeah, for me neither. It's just like mine looks like Wolverine. It gets all intense and then like right here for some reason won't grow in.
We all have that spot that no matter what you do, it doesn't grow in.
And it was the part of the reason I recently hacked it because one of my coworkers came up and he's like, hey, Mr. Wannabe Wolverine over there. I'm like, shut up. Fine, I'll get rid of it.
And time to go. It's time to go when you get the comments.
Right. This is awesome. Well, we've kind of been chatting about me. We go in a little more of like the different nuances of your show and what you cover?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And this has been wonderful. This is like been a genuine conversation, which has been it's very good. It's been a very good flow.
It has been.
Yeah. So us in a nutshell is our goal is to bring holistic self-improvement to the masses. So we talk about life, love, health, and wealth. There's a lot of shows, Josh, that can talk about here's how you make more money. But if you don't resonate with, it's like for a lot of people, how you make more money is not contact more people. It's like you have to change your identity because you're not the type of person who is good at sales. Like, so that's what we're about, is raising people's awareness and then giving them the tactics that we believe will help them at a deep level, where a lot of other places are just saying like, here's 5 ways to make more money. Cool. But what if the money block is not something that they're not doing? It's something that they don't believe they are. And then so for us, it's like, it's that with relationships, it's that with health. Our goal is really to raise the awareness of our community to help them make more aligned, better decisions in the long run, and then give them the tactics to be more consistent in the journey. That's really what we do. Okay.
So especially like your comment of having to change your personality to get more sales or clicks or whatever, is that, let's say someone's super introverted and socially awkward, they can barely pull off a Zoom call. How would you, in your show, how would you help them out?
So one of the things is we talk often about you have your comfort zone. So think of like a bullseye. You have your comfort zone in the middle, you have your learning zone outside of that, and you have your anxiety zone outside of that. For many people, they see, I could never, and again, listen to the verbiage, I could never get on a sales call, or I could never get on a Zoom call with somebody. We start by figuring out, okay, well, what is the next fear-chasing thing you can do? So maybe you shouldn't do that yet. If you're afraid of heights, the last thing you should do is just jump out of a plane. You got to work on something else. You got to work your way up, get on a ladder, then get in an elevator and go to the top of a building. What we do is we check in with, okay, what part of your identity is stopping you from doing that? And what's one thing we can do to get you outside of your comfort zone? So I had somebody reach out and this person said, I want to be a speaker like you. I said, cool, awesome. What are you doing to speak? She said, nothing yet because I'm too afraid. Awesome. I said, on scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone is it for you to do a Facebook Live right now? She said 12 out of 10. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone is it for you to record a video on your phone and show nobody? And she said, that's probably like a 1. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone is it for you to record a video and send it to me only? And I'm not going to show anybody. And she said 5. Okay, cool. So think about it. The scale of 1 to 10, the 12 is you living in the anxiety zone. The 1 is you in the comfort zone. The 5 is you in the learning zone. So that's the advice I would give, is figure out what is the thing that's in your learning zone, not your anxiety zone. And that's the next decision to make. As you do it, your learning zone, your comfort zone expands. So things that used to be impossible are now somewhat easy. Your learning zone expands and your anxiety zone shrinks because your learning zone is pushing outward. That really is it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. So it would be like, if you want to be a coach or like a speaker, but you're not ready for a full-on Facebook Live because you don't want to see the roasting, would be like, make the video and just like upload to YouTube and make it unlisted. Yep. So technically you did it, you made the connections, but okay.
Yep. Send it to a friend. Like, some people start speaking in the mirror. Like, that's what it is. It's like they just start, or they walk down the driveway and give like a speech. I think that we think to ourselves, I could never speak in front of 50,000 people. That's not your first step anyway. That's like saying I could never play, I could never throw the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Nobody starts in the Super Bowl. You start when you're 5 years old playing Pee Wee football and you work your way up. Right. I think that level of I could never do that now is where a lot of people get stuck. You have to understand the long-term potential of what you're doing. When I started podcasting, I never planned on being a speaker. My first speech, I was so scared. I was terrified. But I did it in front of 50 people. And it was like, oh, okay, that wasn't terrible. Right. And then we get on bigger stages. And I think a lot of us see where we are and we assume we can't get to where we want to go. But you just have to look at, like, what's the next available opportunity? Not the last one, the next one.
I agree. Yeah, especially because I've done the speaking before, and it was, for me, like, it's interesting. I'm not worried about speaking to like a lot of people or embarrassing myself. It used to be more self-doubt. It would be like, oh, they're not actually going to care about what I say. And then as a certain point, as I've learned and talked to awesome people like you, I'm like, oh wait, they really don't actually care about me unless I involve them, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a fact. And it's like, I think a lot of people, I just try to think from the aspect of the person in the audience. I ask myself, why would they care about what I'm saying? And then go from there. Why? Because they're only going to care about it if it speaks to them, to your point.
Right.
I have to involve them. It has to have something to do with what they're dealing with. If not, then it's just going to be noise. They have to say, so there's two frames that I have, and I talk about this with podcasters all the time. There's 2 sentences that people will say to themselves, when they're making a decision. 1, that's for me. 2, so what? That's it. So what is, I don't care about that. That has nothing to do with me. That's for me is, I'm the type of person who would click on that. They just have to make that decision. I call it self-identifying. They just have to self-identify as the type of person who likes your speech or podcast.
So in a meta way, you're making content for yourself but others are going to see it, kind of thing. Or did I interpret that wrong?
I think there's 2 ways to do it. I think you can make content for yourself if the person you're trying to attract is your audience.
Okay.
If the person you're trying to attract is you, really, then I think you can cater your content where it's, if you have me come in to speak, Josh, and I'm speaking to a bunch of executives, it's going to be vastly different than a bunch of high schoolers. It has to be. Yeah. I have to put myself in the position of the person in the seat. So it depends. I'm trying to make sure that at all times I am getting a level of depth, but also a level of breadth. So breadth is how many people can I touch? Depth is how many, what's the depth of impact that I can have? I'm trying to think to myself, if I say this, it might help 5 people at a really deep level, but it might not help the other 95 at all. If I say this, I might get a little bit of a breakthrough in everybody. That's probably what I'm going to go with. So that. whatever that is. I think it's just trying to make sure you're relatable and relevant to everybody in the audience to the degree you can be.
Okay. So then would that be then get back to the niching down and making to that audience? But like I mentioned earlier, like I have a concept of who my audience is, but because I don't get much interactions, I don't know. What if I'm talking to someone completely different and I don't know it, kind of thing?
Yeah. So I would look at your stats. I would literally, so this is what we did. I created, I wouldn't say it's an algorithm. It's a pretty simple math equation that anybody could figure out, but all it is it's the number of downloads an episode has divided by the amount of days it's been out. That'll spit out a number. Go through and see which ones are the highest in comparison to the ones around them. So as an example, the highest hitter you've ever had, you said, was the one being comfortable talking to women.
Okay, that one was just weird in of itself. So she essentially she's a female bodybuilder, and she was explaining what she does with clients, this and that. Steamrolled me the whole time, by the way. Like I barely got a word in, and then she started a whole argument with me. But the biggest one, essentially, she just kind of like metaphorically, because she was in Canada, kind of like you, just like virtually slapped me around and said, "Stop being a bitch. If you want a woman, you got to like grab her and force her to be yours." And I'm like, I see so many things going wrong with that.
Yeah.
And that's where, but that one does so amazing. And I'm sitting here going like, what happened?
Share it.
I think she did.
So there's one. That's one piece.
But also the name is just kind of weird. So she goes by Heyoka Empath. And she called me Earth Boy like during the whole thing. So I was like, oh, joking, like, oh, Heyoka Empath and Earth Boy kind of thing.
So that's probably something. The importance of a title is way more valuable than people realize. Way more. Because all you're doing is you're getting people to self-identify. Right? Like if you don't have a group of entrepreneurs listening to your show, 5 ways to grow your business is not a useless episode, but it's not as useful to them.
So then if we were going for a strategy session, you would say make Monday one type of content, Tuesday completely different, do that for a month, see what sticks, and then optimize to that.
First, I would go through your content and get like, what are the patterns? So like, okay, you use the word consistency. That's something. Oh, you used it here too, and that did well. Okay, that's something. It's almost like every problem is the top, it's the canopy of the tree, and then there's a bunch of things that come under that. So consistency is attached to discipline, which is attached to productivity, which is attached to perfectionism, which is attached to procrastination. So like that one word covers so many different topics.
Right.
I go through and look at our data and say, okay, every time we talk about relationships, it works really well. Every time we have this guest on, it works really well. Why? That, and then I try to take from that, and then I test accordingly. Yes. So I would go through the data you have currently and then do it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking. Yeah, it's the ones that did so well are the ones I didn't think were going to actually do so well.
Oftentimes it is that, because maybe your audience isn't who you think.
That's kind of what I'm coming to, because like the second one that we had, it's doing good. It's not doing fantastic. I quit my job good, but the title is The Popcorn Asagi. And right. And I'm seeing like, it was an inside joke on the actual podcast, because we were talking about strategies, and he was a linguistic teacher. And that's where he was trying to make it a metaphor with, because I was eating popcorn while reading my mic, and that's where he said like, oh, is it soggy with all that butter? And I'm like, actually it is. And it was just one of those that was like the whole joke. So then he would tie in whatever and jokingly say popcorn and soggy. Yeah, but it was the one I did not expect it to do as well as it did. But maybe I have a misconceived notion of who my audience.
It's possible. Or again, did that person share it? That's where the guest versus solo is important, because at least if you do a solo episode and it does well, it's not because of a rogue share. That's an interesting thing, is it's organic. At least it's more organic. And this is the other thing. and maybe this aligns. When I'm thinking of titles, I'm thinking of 2 words. I want it to create curiosity, but also have certainty. I'm trying to walk the line of where is it too certain or is it too much curiosity? That episode might have piqued curiosity where people are like, okay, what is this about? I have to hear it. So there's another thing is like, okay, maybe you got 500 clicks, but if you were to look at the overall consumption, what does that look like? Did people stay for 90% of the episode, or did they just listen to the first 5 minutes to figure out what soggy popcorn actually means? Right? It's really, at the end of the day, it's like anything else. You got to look at the data. That's the only way to make the most intelligent decisions.
So I'm curious for you, what host do you use then?
Buzzsprout.
Okay, cool. I use that too. So how do you see the duration on the consumption?
So this is interesting because the podcast industry is still very much the Wild West. You have to log on to Apple Podcast Connect. That's the only, and I think Spotify has their own, but I would say it doesn't come through the host profile or the host provider yet. It comes through the other platform. So Apple Podcast Connect is the place for now, I would say.
Okay, then I will go check that out. Yeah, most of my downloads still come from Apple. So
that's good because you can actually look at real data and you can, that's the important understanding is I think the number. So you have 3 things that help you with the Apple algorithm. And I think it's just Apple. I don't know if it's the other ones. One is consumption. The second one is amount of plays. Those are really the big 2. Is overall consumption and amount of plays.
I thought it was also subscriptions, like getting a consistent subscriptions boost you kind of thing.
Yeah. And then people think reviews is more about social proof than anything. That doesn't help, quote unquote, the algorithm. It just helps bring certainty to your audience.
I was like, oh, he's gotten like 200 people to say something kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It just helps. It's like Amazon. I mean, when you go to Amazon, you're going to buy that microphone. Blue Yeti. When you're going to buy that, you were like, okay, what are the reviews? Oh, 95% of people gave it a 5-star review. Yeah. Okay. That's good for me. That same thing.
Okay, cool. So then what would be, should you ask for subscriptions, I guess, because you've been doing this way longer than me, or like give a nudge at the end of a conversation, be like, okay, if you made it this far, like, could you do me a solid and hit the subscribe kind of thing?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, it's very much like YouTube where you just want to say, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So every time I drop a new episode, you get notified wherever you want. My rule is always make sure you add value first. That's it. Make sure it's not in the first minute. I see a lot of people who do that where they'll be like, all right, we're going to record this episode and they'll do it live with me. Hey, welcome back to another episode. Make sure if you're new here, you subscribe. That's not based on value. So most people won't do it. It's almost like, imagine if you had to tip the waiter before the service. It wouldn't make any sense. It just wouldn't make any sense because you don't know how the service is going to be. Like, I'm not going to subscribe to the show unless I know it's good. So it's the same thing. Make sure you're adding value first. If you're not adding value first, you're not going to really get people to subscribe. Again, that's just from my experience and my opinion.
100%. Hey, I want to be respectful of you and your time to give you a buffer. Is there anything else in specific you want to go over?
No, this was wonderful. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't have any expectations, so I'm glad it went where it went. No, that's it for me in a nutshell. I like jamming on podcasting, so I'm happy.
That's awesome. 3 going out questions for you,
please.
So, other than work, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy during these COVID times?
Other than work, during COVID, I wrote a lot more music. So I like rapping. I'm a big fan of rap. And I do a little writing and rapping on the side. So that was one thing I did for sure. That was a big thing.
Cool. Did you hang out with the family more?
Not really. I'm not a very family driven human.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not. I require very little human interaction, which is why I think being an entrepreneur is very helpful for me because I can just sit in this office. I mean, I see my wife every night, obviously, but other than that, I'm a kind of like, you can just put me in the basement and let me do my thing. I'm happy to be alone.
All right. So someone inspired by you, what are some tips, tricks, or advice you give them to start down a similar path that you're on?
First thing is tap into your why. You'll get way further if you have a real deep heart-driven reason for why you're doing what you're doing. I would have quit this a long time ago if I didn't have a deep why. When I was broke and I couldn't pay my bills and I couldn't make rent, I would have quit. So that's one huge one. 2, really look in the mirror, the proverbial mirror, and be very honest about your strengths and be as honest about your improvement points. I think a lot of us convince ourselves we're really good at stuff when we're not, and we convince ourselves that we're really bad at stuff when we're not. So you got to have a more accurate view of yourself. I think that's important. And then find somebody who can help keep you accountable. Consistency is one of the hardest things for humans to have. But if you have people in your life who can help you be more accountable, stay more accountable, create more necessity, you'll definitely get further in life for sure. So those 3, I'd say.
Perfect. And then where can everyone contact you at?
So you can listen to the show, Next Level University, and my handle on Instagram is @NeverQuitKid. Please, if you have any questions about podcasting, I mean, I hope this is a good example. Like, I will just try to add as much value as I can. You don't need to give me any money. If you want to, I'm happy to work with you, but my thing is value first. So if you have any questions, DM me @NeverQuitKid on Instagram. And our website is nextleveluniverse.com, and that has a bunch of our other contact information as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. You did. Man. You just came in and dropped so much value, and I'm sitting here going, what do I do with all this now?
I appreciate it. Well, I honestly, Josh, I appreciate the humility to want to talk about it live in front of other people. A lot of people don't want to quote unquote look like they don't know everything. So I'm very grateful that you took advantage of it, and I appreciate it very much. Genuinely.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end. You're an awesome person. Not many make it here. So, being the awesome person that you are, can you do me one more awesome favor? Can you rate and review this on whatever podcast services you're using? If you do it on Apple and you leave an actual written review, I have a thing on my website. I will take your written review and post it for all to see. Congratulations, you're permanently sealed on my site. Otherwise, I am trying to do YouTube more and live streaming. I will try to put as many of the YouTube links in the description of the show as I can. So give your boy some extra help over on YouTube. Watch my videos. I just mute it and change the channel, change the window or something. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for being awesome, and see you next time.